Here's a preview of what you'll hear on this episode of Beyond the Wheel.
Why did that one drive so much better than the one we just did yesterday? So we had to come up with a way to assess vehicle problems, and so we developed the process, a systematic process that allows us to put the coach through a series of tests, probably close to 20 different things that we test and assess and rate on a scale of 1 to 10. And then when we get back, we weigh the coach on all four wheels, and we look at the front to rear weight ratios and the side to side numbers. And we look at that and we've developed parameters and percentages that we know it needs to fall within to get the optimum handling.
Now enjoy the show.
You are listening to Beyond the Wheel, a podcast about the people and ideas that drive the RV community forward.
This episode is brought to you by Battleborn Batteries, the best name in the RV and marine industry. These lithium batteries are designed and assembled in the USA, backed by a 10-year warranty. The best solution for your battery anxiety, so go check them out at battlebornbatteries.com.
Whether your adventure is on the road, on the water, or off the grid, Battleborn Batteries keep you out there longer.
With the complexity of all the systems in an RV, I always say it's not if something's going to break, but a matter of when is something going to break. That is why I think an extended warranty for RVs is so important. We first interviewed Wholesale Warranties back in 2019 and immediately became impressed with how their policies worked, such as you can take your RV to any licensed repair shop, including mobile repairs. They also have personalized service plans, making sure you are getting the right policy for your needs. And if you think your RV is too old for a policy, you might be surprised to hear that RVs up to 20 years old can still be approved for a policy. That is more age lenient than most RV parks I've stayed at. Go to wholesalewarranties.com/beyond the wheel or click the link down below in our show notes to get your free quote today. Hey everyone, today we welcome back Robert Henderson from Henderson's Lineup. We first interviewed Robert at the 104th FMCA convention in Tucson, Arizona, where he told us about his upcoming book, Living Life 1 Mile at a Time, which is now available on Amazon. Robert sits down with us to share the inspiration of the book, what type of information you will find in the book, and we learn along the way how Henderson's Lineup can improve the ride and handling of your RV. Robert even gives us a sneak peek of the workings of his second book. So let's get this episode started.
Hi, Robert. Welcome to the show. If you could tell us a little bit about Henderson's Lineup and your role at the company.
That's Henderson's Lineup was a family business that started in 1961. My dad took over a alignment shop and had 8 kids along with him, and had never been a professional mechanic, was actually looking to buy a parts house as he worked at a parts house. And the guy that he bought the shop from turned out to be an alcoholic. So after 2 weeks, Dad said, "I can do better without you here." And I say it was pretty providential the way things worked out, because the Interstate 5 was just going in and our shop was a short distance off of the freeway. And my dad had sold a Stuart Warner Alamine strobe light balancer to a guy down in Fort Bragg, California. And that was at that time, my dad said he paid like $425 for it, which is a lot of money back in, probably would have been 59 or 60 when he sold it to him. And he told Dad, he said, "If you want this thing, I'll sell it to you for $75. I can't figure out how to use it." And so Dad said, "Sure, he'll take it." And when the freeways came in, they were doing 70 miles an hour better. And back in those days, none of the drums were balanced on the cars. So so all there was around Grants Pass and pretty much most places was bubble balancers. There was very limited on the car balancers. And so Dad had one of those balancers, was able to balance the brake drum as well as the tire and wheel. And so that got him started. And some days I wasn't there, but they said they balanced, my dad and one of my older brothers balanced close to 100 tires in one day. Well, I remember balancing 50 tires in one day with my dad and I, but by that time we had the Hunter tune-in balancer that you put on the wheel and you had to adjust the knobs, add or subtract weight and move it around. But so it was a pretty amazing, and had a big our garden, our house is there. So I started sweeping the floors for my dad and cleaning tools for him when I was just a young guy. So I kind of grew up in the business. I say my mom fed me with a brake spoon when I was a kid, So nowadays, I don't have to be here as much. We have some really good people. We spent a lot of time teaching leadership, and our goal is really not so much to fix cars or fix parts or sell parts. In my opinion, our job really is to build people. The better people we build, the better company we can build. So we spend a lot on leadership and creating a culture where people can thrive and flourish and be their very best. So we know that we can grow no more than we grow our people. Because I've been in the past, I've seen where we've set some goals, you hit a goal, and everybody works hard to get it. And the next month, you're half of that, So I said, what can we do to build a sustainable company that we can build long term? And our mission motto is become safer and happier driving for more people. And so that's been our goal. And that's kind of why I wanted to write the book, was to allow more people to learn some of these things. Because one of the things that shocked me so much when I went out on the road, I just thought the bad work was only in Grants Pass. But when I started traveling, I got hooked up with some guys from a guy named Don Loftner from Safety Plus Steering Control, took me out, and we started going to other towns. And I started looking at underneath people's motorhomes that had work done at this quote unquote famous shops in the area. And I thought, man, if that kind of work ever came out on my shop, I would be so embarrassed, because they weren't getting the problems addressed properly. And working on RVs has proven to be the biggest challenge there was. We raced stock cars, and we would cut the coil springs, make sway bars up, make shocks fit the hot rods and the low riders and whatever. But when we got into motorhomes, the things that I learned on the automotive side just wasn't holding up. The parts just couldn't take the kind of load and the kind of weight. And so we had to do a lot of relearning. And in fact, I tell people now, if I ever say I know it all, you better stop listening to me, because there's absolutely something new you can learn every day. Mine's like a parachute. Somebody said it only functions when it's open.
I like that. I didn't realize until I read the book, actually, how complicated working on RVs can be, because it sounds like every RV, even within the same model, can be a little bit different and a little more of a challenge. So I found that really interesting when I read the book.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things that we've had to learn. And we see in the industry, and you read the blogs and you read the newsletters, and that one person has had one motorhome. Now suddenly they're an expert on all motorhomes. It just isn't that way. And I'm not saying there's not value in reading blogs or listening to people, because I listen to people all the time, because they're the person that owns it. But there's so many varieties of wheelbases and overhangs. Where do they put the slide out? Do they have washer and dryer? Is the guy got a motorcycle on his front bumper or back bumper? All those things, so many factors. And then you just got the whole thing of different components coming together. Steering gears is one of the things that we find. Some steering gear designs are extremely fickle, and you just don't know what you're going to get. And I found that out oftentimes the hard way. I did find that out even in the automotive side. I remember one particular great customer, he had about 100,000 miles on his Chevrolet Suburban when I finally put a different steering gear in it. And that different steering gear made the thing drive a lot better, because right out of the gate, quite often on a steering gear, there'll be something off or something wrong with it. And so customer will live with that for hundreds of thousands of miles sometimes, because you have to analyze each component individually and do things one at a time, to try to dial in and find out what exactly the problem is. You can't always shotgun things, and just, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you can help stuff. But for me, I wanted to be the last place somebody had to go. I didn't want them to have to go someplace else after they came to Henderson's Lineup. Now, the choice is theirs. They don't have to get it fixed, but I want to be able to tell them what the issue is, and then they can make up their mind whether it's worth it for them to do something about it.
I guess before we get too far into it, we should mention the name of the book.
Yeah, Living Life One Mile at a Time. is the name of the book, and it's called Secrets for Safer and Happier Driving. Because there's a lot of secrets that I've learned over the hard way. My dad had a definition of experience that I never forgot. I like it. He says experience is something that happens to you wish happened to somebody else, you know. So, but usually those things you learn the hard way will stick with you the longest, unfortunately. But I want to try to learn from other people's mistakes, because I realize I'm never going to live long enough to make all my own mistakes.
You had said something just a few minutes ago, and I think it kind of goes back to what you had said back where we interviewed at the FMCA, is that, you know, the isolation and testing parts individually. I think at the rally we had said, you know, it's common for people just throw parts at a vehicle without actually assessing what is going on with it. Can you talk a little bit of why that's so important? Like, why can't somebody just buy, I don't want to name company products, but a bunch of products and just throw them all on their RV? What's, you know, the benefit of assessing each individual part?
Well, you know, it's kind of on our list of things we want to cover today, was the road performance assessment. And the reason we came up with that road performance assessment, you know, I'll never forget it. I mean, these things stick with me. Had a good customer. He owned a well drilling service in town, and he brought his motorhome in. And we had just worked on one of the same chassis the day before, and everything turned out great. Real happy. Everything we did the same thing on his coach, and the results weren't so good. It's like, what is going on here? How come that one worked out so good? So we go, you know, time out. We got to find out what it is. What's going on here? Why did that one drive so much better than the one we just did yesterday? So we had to come up with a way to assess vehicle problems. And so we developed the process, a systematic process that allows us to put the coach through a series of tests, steering and handling tests, probably close to 20 different things that we test and assess and rate on a scale of 1 to 10. And then when we get back, we weigh the coach on all four wheels, and we look at the front to rear weight ratios and the side to side numbers. And we look at that, and we've developed parameters and percentages that we know it needs to fall within to get the optimum handling. Now, usually we can help any motorhome out, but if the numbers aren't right to begin with, those base numbers, if those numbers aren't right, we're not going to get as good of results. And I remember a guy had been all over the place. He'd spent a lot of money getting a lot of products put on his F53. This wasn't that long ago. This is just probably a year or two ago. He had just was not happy with it. So we ran the numbers on it, and sure enough, he was way light on the front axle. So that's why we did that, because if we can be, I'd like to be able to not surprise. I don't want to surprise people when we get done. So we want to be able to tell them what we can and can't do based on those weight ratios. And that way we can give a consistent product, or let people know, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, this thing is like a 2 or 3 now. We'll probably get it up to a 7 or 8, but we're not going to get it to a 9 or 10 and because of the numbers that we're working with here. So, you know, it's nice to know on the front side that, you know, like we said, people like surprises. I like birthday surprises, anniversary surprises, but I don't like those surprises when somebody heads down the road, hey, you know, call you up and I'm still not happy with this thing one. You know, it's not driving right. A truck I get passed by a semi and it changes lanes on me. And that's basically what happens. You know, if those weight ratios are not correct, that's what's going to happen. But you know, if you don't assess each one of those components and look at everything individually, you can run into those unsatisfied customers.
And that assessment, that's not just for the F53 chassis, I would imagine. It's for Class Cs and other vehicles as well.
Yeah, we even developed one for fifth wheels as well, pickups and fifth wheels as well. But yeah, it gives you a chance to know where you stand before you get started on something, so you get your base numbers there. And besides that, when you get done, if we go over the same route that we were just on previously, the person's going to know, hey, I can really feel a difference in that. And that's what we like to do. We like to go over the same route at the same speeds or a little faster. And then after we're happy with it and we think everything's dialed in, it's all adjusted right and everything, then put the customer behind the wheel because I want them to feel the difference in it. They're the one that invested the money. So often, it's pretty amazing in our industry how many people just drop their rig off. The customer goes out and tells them what they feel, and then the customer comes and picks it up and drives away. Well, I appreciate my dad. I'm grateful for the father God gave me, because my dad spent a lot of time. He would take the customers out and let them drive the coach, let them drive the car on the way back. We'd have a test route, we'd take it on, prove it to him, and then switch places and let the customer feel the difference. So I'm grateful for my dad. He was a pilot in World War II. He flew 69 missions, D-Day, Battle of the Bulge, and lost him unfortunately in 2009. But I was grateful for the engineering mind that he had. And now my son Tommy is the same way. He has an engineering degree. He worked for Cummins as a mechanical engineer, and Tommy's heading up our R&D effort now. And so he's really doing a great job documenting things so we can really analyze numbers and look at them. Seat of the pants is super, super important, don't get me wrong, but to have a way to assess some of these things and look at them where we can have some recorded data, so we don't always have to go off, well, what do you think about it? Well, I remember we worked on one a couple of years ago, so we're going to develop a database to where we can see what components, and we've been doing some amazing development work on we bought a new Winnebago with a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter chassis, and we've made some phenomenal improvements in that chassis by buying one. So we like to invest in a coach, and so we really get to feel it. We bought a Tiffin on an F53 chassis, and we were able to make tremendous improvements in that by living with it and driving it. And as somebody used to say, I feel your pain, it's helped us tremendously by doing that.
So it sounds like you're still very much a family business. You said that your son is working with you. That's always great to hear as well.
Yeah, we're working on a succession continuity plan, because to me, I want to make sure the same heart of doing things right for the right reason that my dad had, that I have, and that Tommy has that. And so really grateful for him, because he's a very amazing young man. I say that he's a lot smarter than I was when I was his age,
It's off to a good start then.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question, but I think maybe from listening to you, I might even have the answer. So why does something say like the F53, like why does the Ford chassis have so many poor driving abilities? Is it because Ford doesn't really know what's going on top of the chassis, and then once weight is added, the slides, is that the reason? And then, after that house part is put on the top of the chassis, nobody after that step is doing this type of assessment or even weighing the four corners. Is that the reason why they're prone to unhappy drivers?
Well, that's definitely part of it. And within the industry, you have the bodybuilders and the chassis people, and they have specs that they use, and like Ford and Workhorse said that they can have up to 75% of the wheelbase as overhang, and it's still within their specs. Well, yeah, it's within the specs, but it's on the borderline edge of the specs. And I know if we have something with a 75% overhang ratio, that's the distance the frame goes behind the back wheels versus the wheelbase from the center of line of the front axle to the back axle. If we have that much of an overhang ratio, it's definitely going to affect how it drives. So you've got those numbers. And then the F53 chassis is a truck chassis. It's not really designed for, it's more of a truck chassis. It's not designed for high speed running out on the road on long drives. Well, most motorhomes, you're not running it downtown to pick up a cup of coffee. At least I don't know, too many people do that. So you're out there for long stretches on the road. And you have a leaf spring design, a taper leaf that they're trying to design it to have a soft ride. And so they put soft bushings in the eyes on them. They're long, so they're very flexible. So it lends itself to just a lot of handling issues. You get that movement in those bushings, and any movement in an axle, either front axle or rear axle, is going to cause the coach to steer off one way or another. And that was why we named our first product Super Steer, because steering complaints, one of the biggest complaints people have. You got a rig that's, wide up to, what are they at now? You can have up to like 102 inches wide or something like that. So, and you've got a lane that's not a whole lot wider than that. So you've got to really thread the needle, so to speak. And when you get in the wind and the truck ruts, you know, it's going to be pretty hairy. And especially if you have a steering issue, because steering issues they're just more exasperated by handling issues. So if the chassis is unstable and you've got a steering issue, then you're going down the road and you hit a bump, and then you wind up correcting and overcorrecting, especially if you have a vehicle that wants to head off to one side of the road, you know, which is pretty common. It's one of the things that we really check is the return to center on a vehicle is very critical. If it doesn't have a good return to center, it can be real hairy. I noticed that you guys were talking about that flick test. You know, that's one of the things we do. We go down the road and I flick the steering wheel to the right. Does it go off to the right and come back, or does it continue off the road into the ditch? No poor return to center. If I do it to the left, does I flick it left? Does it go left and then come back straight, or does it head into oncoming traffic? And fortunately, most vehicles have a tendency to head to the right. And I've heard truck drivers say that Freightliner used to design the truck to pull to the right. If they fell asleep, it was going to go off the road, and instead of into oncoming traffic, which I tell people, if you're going to drift one way or the other, I'd rather have it drifting to the right for that reason. I'd rather have you drift off rather than into oncoming traffic. But the goal is to have as minimum amount of that as possible, because if you're constantly fighting a right-hand drift, for instance, then it's irritating and you find your shoulders, you're kind of worn out because you're always fighting the wheel. So it's those are the kind of fine tuning we try to do to make that a pleasurable experience. Because, you know, it's a lot of people retired now. They felt like they got a whole new career trying to keep their motorhome on the road, you know.
It's fatiguing. It can really be work. Yeah. And you talk about overhang, but you also talk about this in the book, the overhang. This is also included in your writings. I might have, maybe I missed it, but what was the inspiration for the book? Why did you want to sit down and document all this? Is it just to share the information with potential customers? What was the reason your reasoning behind the book?
Well, steering and handling is really personal to me. In fact, I share a story in there how when I was a kid, I was only interested in speed. That's what I was really interested in when I bought my 55 Chevy. My brother was into drag racing, and so I got my 55, thought nothing really about the suspension other than I put a set of air shocks on the back of it so the tires would fit, and had shackles on it that were about 8 inches long, which is that's just a bad thing to do because it puts a lot of leverage against your bushings. It creates more sway. On the front of the car, I had a decent set of shock absorbers, but it had no anti-sway bars on it. But it was running. I had spent a lot of money on balancing and blueprinting a small block Chevy hot rod motor, and we dealt with the machine shop all the time, fitting kingpins. Back in the day, we did a lot of kingpins, and we put bronze bushings in them. So I take them to the machine shop, and I got to be friends with the guy that had it, and he knew about hot rodding, and he had a place that could balance my parts for me and get them basically blueprinted. And so it ran good when we got it running. It was a strong running motor, but by that time, I'd ran away from home, towed my 55 Chevy down to my buddy's house because my dad didn't care much for my friends. And I think I know why he didn't care for him now, because we started drinking Schlitz malt liquor and Southern Comfort about 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning and smoking dope before it was legal here in Oregon. So we went out racing around the countryside. We were just ripping and roaring around the country, and summer night in Oregon, it stays light till about 9:30 or 10 in the summertime. So it was getting dark out. So let's go to town, man. Let's go cruise the gap. We made one pass through town, and made my second pass through town, came around the corner, hit the throttle, and I couldn't stop. I was going too fast, and I hit a car, and I broke. And he gets out and looks at his truck, his vehicle, and my car. All I did was break out my left front light. So naturally, I throw the keys on the seat and say, buddies, we're walking home before I kill somebody, hurt my car. That's what I should have done, but that's not what I did. I took off. Instead of going through town, I'm in a 25 mile an hour residential zone, something like that. in the day, and right by our city park, just wide open as fast as I could, and just banging the gears off. I had a solid lifter cam in it, so it tacked up pretty tight. And I just banged off third gear, and a kid I went to school with had a brand new Chevy 4x4 pickup, and he pulled out right in front of me. And all I can tell you that every day I get up, I'm grateful that I'm alive, because I can tell you that it wasn't me driving that car. I went shooting off the road, back onto the road as precision as it had the best suspension out there. What it did was so precise, and it was dirt on the side of the road. I'll never forget as long as I live. It's this huge cloud of dust. And what's even more amazing, there was a party. There was these two twin girls. They were like super popular. Like they were both rally squad girls, and I didn't hang out with those. They were way above my pay grade. I was more of the quote unquote more of the losers that were the guys that were out hot rodding and stuff like that. So anyway, it's so precise and just so amazing, and I'll never forget as long as I live. I could have killed a bunch. If I'd have survived, I probably would have wanted to just kill myself, because I could have killed a bunch of people that night. But no seatbelts. Didn't wear seatbelts in the 70s. You didn't even have them in my 55. I wasn't macho to wear seatbelts back in those days, And so about 10 years later, I've become a follower of Jesus Christ. I found this verse in the Bible, and my paraphrase is, angels have to keep knuckleheads like me alive long enough to come to know Jesus, their Lord and Savior. And I said, that's what happened that night. But out of that, I started doing these things called quick lane changes. I was inspired to do quick lane changes. So I'd ask people with a motorhome, we still ask them this question today, in event of emergency, would you like to know what your vehicle's going to do? And so we'll do a quick lane change, swerve off the road back in one lane into the other lane and back to like a collision avoidance thing,
Okay.
Because if you're driving down the road, and let's say a semi in front of you loses a load of steel, you got a choice. I'm going to run over that and take the bottom of my rig out, or am I going to change lanes? I was down in Florida, and somebody had lost a ladder. I'm cruising down the freeway, and all of a sudden there wasn't any cars around me, and I just realized there's a step ladder right in front of me. Well, I was able to do a quick lane change and avoid that. And just the other day, we were hosting an author and a speaker, and we were headed out to the venue where he was going to speak. And we'd had a heavy duty windstorm, and the power had been out downtown, and the street lights were out. So I'm cruising up the road, just kind of talking and stuff, and not really thinking about what's going on. And a guy pulled out right in front of me. I'm in my a little Chrysler Town and Country van that we have. And I had a choice. I'm going to clobber that guy, or I'm going to avoid him. I was able to jerk the wheel back, in one lane, out of the other lane, in the middle of the intersection. And, I was trained to do that. I've been doing that for so many years now. It was just like, was like a reflex action to me. So, but we do that with people's RVs, with their motorhomes, just to duplicate, because most people have no idea what their vehicle is going to do in an emergency. So we like to let people know that, because we want to make the invisible visible. That's one of our goals. And so if people know what to expect, and then they're more able to avoid something that could have been really nasty for them. And we're not telling people to do that all the time, but by doing that, we can show them a before and after difference and improve the safety and stability. Now, in the event you get into a huge blast of wind, which is probably more likely that you're going to have that than somebody pulling out right in front of you. But I certainly have had people pull out in front of me driving an RV. But the huge blast of wind that comes out of nowhere and literally can knock you off the road. There's people that have been killed with their families because a huge blast of wind completely knocked them off the road. Well, so that's why we feel it's important what we do to, again, make the invisible visible and let people know what to expect before they have to have, because if you have to spend time thinking about something, it'd be too late then,
Yeah, unfortunately, I've driven through many wind storms, and especially out west, it's very, very common. I agree with you. It's more common to have wind issues on the road than any other kind. What about the tires and how important is the inflation of tires when considering how much air? Like I read this in forums a lot. People will always post on a forum and say, hey, my tire PSI says it should be 110, but inside the cab, it says it should be 80. Who's right?
If you haven't got anything else to look at, you can go off of what it says on the placard, because the manufacturer posted it. So if something goes wrong, it's their fault,
Okay.
And it should be halfway close, but there's a huge variation in weights on vehicles. I mean, the overhang has a huge effect on that, and where they put the appliances, the slides, all of those things are very important. Then what's the guy carrying? This guy's a rock collector. He's got 2,000 pounds of rocks in his basement, and so it's really important to get it weighed, because the old story where the rubber meets the road is really true. That rubber forms up, where the rubber hits the road, there's a contact patch there. And if you get that off, if you're running too much air pressure, it can make it ride harder and also have more of a tendency to want to wander. If you get it wrong and you're running it too low, then the tire can actually overheat and then cause a blowout. So that's really important to get that set right. Now, that being said, will I fudge on that? Will I adjust that up and down sometimes a little bit one way or the other? Usually it's on the higher side. Like on the back of one of the motorhomes that I have, I found out that if I pump that tire pressure up about 10 pounds or 15 pounds over the recommended setting on the back of the coach, it had less tail wag in it. It tightened it up some back there. So you can play with that a little bit, and you can adjust it up and down. If you adjust it up and down a little bit one way or the other, just to test, like only for 5 miles or something like that, you don't have to worry about overheating the tire or something. But you don't want to run it below the recommended pressure for long periods of time. But if you're just trying to test something and evaluate something, you can certainly do that, because one of the big complaints people have is ride quality. So if we can keep our air pressures as low as possible, we'll get some more cushion in the tire itself. And when I can, it's nice if you can put a bigger tire on the wheel safely. If you don't have dual wheel spacing problems, or you hit the fender wells up front, if I can put an little bit of oversized tire, then maybe drop the air pressure down some. And typically that's going to help soften the ride up. So yeah, tire pressure is definitely very important. It's one of the easiest things that you can work with.
And that's something that you guys are assessing too. Like, you're not just looking for mechanical solutions when somebody brings their rig in. You're looking at what I would consider an easy fix, or a cheap fix anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to look at that. And tires are really different. I've seen tires that were spec'd for urban use installed on motorhomes, and they got some of the goofiest channeling wear patterns on them. And I thought, why did this tire manufacturer ever sell all these tires to a motorhome manufacturer if they were spec'd for urban use? It's like, why'd you do that? You had too many of them, you're trying to get rid of them, or what? And so getting the right tire is really important. And I get it. Our tires age out quite often. My goal is to wear out a set of tires. I've almost worn out our tires on our Ford. So I felt really good about that, because usually you're throwing the tires away based on age. They got all this rubber left on them because of the age and the danger of a blowout. But yeah, you want to get the right tire. So if you buy a really cheap Chinese tire, some of the Chinese tires are really heavy and they got lots and lots of steel and stuff in them. So yeah, they're cheaper, but they might ride a lot harder than, say, like an XRV RV tire designed by Michelin for a softer ride, which right now the problem we're dealing with currently is getting any rubber. I mean, XRVs right now, I've been trying to get them for 6 months for our Ford, and I haven't been able to get them. And I found out yesterday, talking to my Michelin store manager, that BF Goodrich is owned by Michelin, and Michelin's so far behind on their own tire that they're not even going to make any BF Goodrich truck tires this year, which are more of a way that you can save some money by a BF Goodrich tire, because Michelin actually builds them for the larger sizes, but you can't get them. I mean, it's tough. I might have to put something else on mine. I don't really want to run the truck tires because they do ride harder, and trying to soften the ride up as much as I can on that Ford F53 chassis. That's one of the issues with that chassis, is hard ride, as are on other coaches as well.
I didn't realize that the truck tires actually rode harder.
Yeah, they have
That's
more steel, stronger sidewalls, which if you're looking to take some of the squirm out of the vehicle, stiffer sidewalls can help on that as well. So
so.
there's a lot to it.
Yeah, and I would imagine nowadays people are probably like, "Oh, I just want to put as much air in as possible and get the best
Yeah.
MPGs," right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure that's what a lot of people are thinking right now.
I don't blame him. 5 or 6 miles per gallon, what I get when I run on my V10 hard down the road. So, but the little Mercedes, that does a lot better on mileage. So I'm kind of, for some reason, wanting to drive it more. We're doing a lot of testing, a lot of R&D on it now. Don't get me wrong. I like to have the size. We were 8 months on the road in our Ford a couple years ago. This year, I didn't want to spend 8 months in that small little Sprinter chassis. I mean, I could if I have to, but it's good. I'm loving it a lot because I can do 80 miles an hour with that chassis. Well, the Ford has a rev limiter on it, which shuts it off at 75 or 76 miles an hour.
It's funny that you've even tested the limit on her.
Oh yeah, 80 miles an hour across Texas. We've been going to Florida every year now from Oregon, and that's like a 3,500 mile trip the way we go. And so when you get to Texas, it's like, man, 800 miles of Texas, so, and it's 80 miles an hour speed limit. So yeah, we pretty much max it out and, put a brick on the throttle.
Yeah. I always dread driving through Texas because it's not just, a couple hours through Texas. It's like, it can be a couple days through Texas.
Oh, yeah.
If you hit it just right.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
When writing the book, how did you come up with which items you wanted to cover in the book? Like, how did you decide what made it to the book and what didn't?
We focus quite a bit on steering, but the other common issues that people do run into, since there is a lot more steering complaints typically and handling complaints, rough ride and sway and wander, we try to hit all those ones that are common and some of the unusual things that people don't realize, that they're not going to realize. That it took me many, many years to figure a lot of this stuff out. So just there are definitely things that will make a difference that if you don't know about them, you can waste a lot of time and a lot of money. Like, for instance, I think I mentioned this one in the book. Yeah, I did. The story of a guy comes up to me at a show. I think we're down in Perry, Georgia, I believe it was. And he said he wanted to buy a 270-pound Safety Plus centering unit for his Ford F-53 chassis. And he said he's not getting enough return to center out of his coach. And I go, wait a minute, let's go out and do an inspection on that thing. And because that should not have to use that chassis. That's like one that we use on big, heavy diesel pushers. It's actually designed for lift trucks. And they do use it. I believe they're using it on another application that they're doing where they really need a lot of return to center on one of the IFS units. But so I said, well, let's tell you what, let's do this. Let's jack the front end up off the ground. And so we jacked them up off the ground using his levelers, which I do not recommend lifting that and getting underneath there because there's no safeties on them for doing that. So be really careful with those. As every year there's usually somebody that gets killed playing with leveler jacks, a hose pops or something happens to them without they're called leveler jacks for a reason. They're not called lifting jacks. So
right.
And so we got the front end off the ground. I said, turn the steering wheel the whole way to the right, let go of it. And then I had him turn it the whole way to the left and let go. And that's what I'll do when I'm testing to see if somebody's got an issue with a bad cylinder or something. And what I found was that there was something rubbing. It wasn't coming back straight, but I found it was steering column was rubbing on a rubber cover underneath there. So it was creating enough drag to where the steering wouldn't come back straight. And so I said, tell you what, you fix that. This guy was a do-it-yourselfer. And so I said, you fix that and get back a hold of me and let me know if everything works good then. So he fixed that and got back a hold of me. He said, yeah, everything's fine now. So this would have been another case, spending more money on something to cover up, something else. And that's another one of the things that we do run into is that some of the steering controls out there are very, very excellent for his return to center, but they can mask over other problems. I've seen people wearing their tires out because they're towed out. Normally, when they're towed out further at the front, they're going to wander. And I'll never forget this one. Is in Florida, and I was talking to a guy, and I said, "Do you have any complaints about this?" And, "Oh, no, it's driving good. I just want you to do an inspection." So I go out there and we check for tire wear too, and it's got some pretty severe tire wear on it. And I said, "Have you noticed this?" And he says, "No, I never noticed it." The steering control he was using was doing such a good job keeping it straight, was that he didn't notice that his tires were wearing out on it. So you got to be really careful with some aftermarket products when you mask over an existing chassis problem. I've seen people spend $3,500 on a Howard Active Steer. I told them, this not, you've got other issues with this coach and you're not going to be happy with this. "Oh, no, I want it. I want it." And I said, "Well, if I have to take it off there, I'm gonna have to charge you to take it off." And, "Okay, I'll, whatever," and put it on there. Sure enough, he wasn't happy with it, wanted it taken off because he had other issues with it. Now, we were able to figure out what those other issues were later on down the road, but that's another good example of somebody using an aftermarket product to mask an existing problem.
Yeah, another good reason of why you had said earlier, not to just throw parts at something without really assessing it. But you brought up a really good point too, or an interesting point, is that you might think you have one issue, but it's something else causing that issue, and it's another great reason to have a professional like you guys to assess what's going on. Because I would have put money on that Safety Plus too, thinking, oh, it's just the Safety Plus not strong enough to bring back the center, not thinking that something else was causing the issue and preventing it from coming to center. So they're really good points.
Yeah, and another thing that I tell people is that when you're on the road traveling, make sure you keep copies of your repair orders with you, because if something happens, you get ran off the road or something happens, something goes on, something's not working right. I've got to try to sort all this out, and you got to be kind of like Perry Mason, the detective, to go back and figure all these things out. So a lot of times people do work that either isn't done right or they're masking over a problem, which I can't tell you how many times I've seen people do front brake job after front brake job without addressing the fact that the back brakes are never working right. And so they keep putting front brakes on there all the time, and stop and saying, why aren't the back brakes wearing like they should be wearing? You have to look at everything in a holistic approach, and keep your receipts with you, because it can save you a lot of money if somebody has to go through and try to sort out what's been done or hasn't been done on a vehicle. Because most people, they're not going to remember everything that was done if that's not what they do for a living. Even if you do it for a living, you can't remember everything all the time. So it's good to have records with you. Yeah, if you want to keep your originals at home, great, do that, but keep copies in a file with you. So if something happens, like an alignment report, we always like to give people the alignment report right off of our machine. So keep it with you. We give them the original. We photocopy a copy of it so we can have a copy for our records, and then send the customer down the road with it. So if something happens and it's been working well for him and he gets ran off the road or whatever, you've got something to share with another shop, how the vehicle was aligned. And another point that I like to tell people when it comes to wheel alignment, it costs quite a bit of money to get alignment done on a motorhome. It's not a bad idea just to ask the guy, when's the last time you had this machine calibrated? When's the last time? Because I like to have our machines calibrated a couple times a year just to make sure they're staying accurate.
Yeah, something I wouldn't have thought about either. And you bring up alignment, and this is something that I learned from the book, is that fifth wheels and travel trailers can have an alignment. And I've never heard that before. How is an alignment on a towable different than an alignment on a motorized?
Well, your front wheels on a travel trailer don't turn. Yeah, I mean, they don't turn right or left. They roll, but they don't turn. So you got to make sure they're all dialed in straight ahead, and the thrust angles all set perfectly in relation to the either the kingpin or the bumper. If it's a bumper mount, we line up everything. It's the same type of if we were lining semis running 10,000 miles a month, we do the same type of equipment that we use to line up a travel trailer. So everything's going to come off of that kingpin or that bumper pull right at that point. So we have adapters that we've either made or bought that allows us to run everything. So not only are the wheels, the toe end set properly at the proper amount of toe end, but they're all set in relation to that point where it's pulling from. Because if you're going down, the wheels may not have a toe end problem and maybe set okay, but if the thrust angle is off in relation to the center line going down the middle of that trailer, then it's going to cause it to drag. You're going to have more aerodynamic drag. So we want to have that thing cut the air as clean as possible, creating as least amount of rolling resistance. And rolling resistance is a big factor in terms of fuel economy and mileage. It's up there further than what some people realize. So rolling resistance is really important. So if you line that trailer up properly, it's going to cut the air cleaner and roll down the road as free as possible.
Yeah, I often hear when people talk about towing, a lot of times it's not weight, but it is air resistance and just resistance in general. So there's some really good points too.
Yeah, aerodynamics are a big factor, and we address that. We probably could spend more time. I've got some ideas about aerodynamic products that we could develop to help in that area, but we just got to find the right people to partner with or increase our manufacturing abilities, because there is some current products on there now that we do recommend, like air tabs, little vortice generators that help reduce the aerodynamic drag, and it helps keep your back window cleaner on your motorhome and your tow car cleaner as well. And they do help it be more stable in the wind, because there's such a vacuum that's created when you drive down the road with a big flat back of a vehicle. And so it's creating a lot of vacuum. You're standing on the side of the road and you see all this dirt and dust when a semi goes by. Well, it's really, a lot of that's literally being sucked off the ground because it's creating a vacuum when it goes down the road. So little vortice generators cause that air to flow evenly around the backside of the vehicle. So it cuts the air cleaner and creates less drag.
Okay. I've never even heard that term before. That's when you call it a generator, it's actually
vortice generator. Vortices are little wind swirls that cause that air to float smoothly around the back of that vehicle.
Okay. Interesting. Mm-hmm. So where can people find the book right now?
Currently, right now, it's only available as a Kindle version on Amazon. I've been waiting because of the China virus problem, like everything else, paper shortage and what have you. I'm supposed to have an answer by the end of next week when I will have the hard copies, because they're bought and paid for them a long time ago. And it's frustrating. I'm very concerned about the future of our country and our nation and literally the world, because we've got some people that are power hungry, madmen in power that are creating shortages and creating a lot of our problems. And it's pretty frustrating when you're in the manufacturing business, with talking to a lot of people I know. It's just like hard to get stuff that they would normally not have any issues getting. So it's an interesting time to try to run a business, and there's something simple like paper, and then the supply chain issue, like I just told you about the tire situation with BF Goodrich. I've never heard of such a thing where they had to completely put a series of tires on hold because they couldn't, they're so far behind on their own brand, which BF Goodrich is owned by Michelin. So, but it's crazy times. So we've lived through a lot. We went through the 70s when inflation, we were changing price sheets every 3 months. It was close to 20%, and went through the subprime mortgage crash during the 2008 and all that. Went through all that stuff, but that's what we're going through now is definitely a different thing, and our nation's in a different state. I'd like to see us. We try to build all American stuff as much as possible, and I'd like to see us get a lot more American manufacturing back inside the United States. Like I understand the chip shortage, really with the places over there in Taiwan, they're building some more chip plants here in the United States, and there's been a lot of huge profit made by having Chinese people build parts, and I love the Chinese people, but it's really sad when you have people that are literally slave labor, they're political prisoners or whatever. No wonder we can get stuff so cheap over there. And it's sad. We have to reevaluate what we're doing as a nation, and where are we going to be if we don't do something? We're going to be in a world of trouble. So we do our best to work with our vendors and stuff, and we don't ship stuff overseas trying to get cheap quotes on stuff. But we've had some people knock our stuff off with parts from China, and they say some of them stole our part number and that, but that's not our parts, and we let people know about that. So we do our best to support our nation and the people that work here.
Yeah, I think it's been a big wake up call for most of us in the U.S. And I know you said it's frustrating as a manufacturer. It's frustrating for consumers too.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's definitely something that's affecting all of us. And I know that this book has just come out, but we're curious: are you working on book number 2?
Well, I talked to my wife about that. She says, well, you can't talk about the other book because it's not RV related. So wait a minute. It's we ride a tandem. We typically ride around 3,500 miles a year, 2,500 to 3,500 miles a year on a tandem bike. I said, what do you mean, honey? I said, when you ride a tandem, you have to get along with each other. Otherwise, it can destroy your marriage. You can either make it stronger, make it worse. And communication is super important on a tandem. So the name of that book, which we're working on together, is called Living Life in Tandem, subtitle Living in Harmony with the One You Love.
Nice.
But I think it relates a lot to RVer, because the RVer, you're in pretty tight space. You have to hang around with this person. You got to really love them. I'll never forget, years ago, we had somebody came in with a big, beautiful country coach, but he said, well, I'm going to get rid of this one because we want to get one with a hot tub in the back of it. So we're going to buy a new 45 footer with a hot tub in the back of it. And this person and his wife did not like each other. I could tell that. And so that's why they needed a big motorhome, so they'd be more separate. But for the most part, we love hanging around RVers. We made a lot of wonderful friends over the years. I've been so blessed and met amazing friends. Everywhere we go, we have people that want us to come and see them, and we want to come and see them too. It's frustrating because a lot of times they just don't have the time. But living and spending time with your wife in an RV is a huge blessing for me, because I love hanging out with my wife. She's my best friend. And so, yeah, the next book, Living Life in Tandem, that's the next one that we're working on.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I really like that. And Sean's a towable person. He's got the fifth wheel. I think Sean will tell you nothing will start an argument faster than having your wife trying to back you into a spot or something like that. So living in harmony and being on the same page for things, it's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to keep my wife happy. Like my brother used to say, he would say, I have to go home and give my wife a good listening to.
That's good. But I think that's all of all of our questions today. Robert, is there anything that you wanted to add, or anything that I might have missed that you want to bring up?
Not really. We're just, if anybody ever has any questions about any vehicle they're thinking about buying, we like to tell people some of the idiosyncrasies to look for. And we do spend quite a bit of time in the book trying to help people make up your mind what you want to do. And before you invest a lot of money, and still go out and rent some. There's the RV rent things going on nowadays, so you can, at least try it and see if you like it. Because some people just really take to it quick. Other people don't like it. But one of the things that we do see as important is if you can make that vehicle handle good, your wife's going to feel comfortable driving it. Because like for me, I definitely need somebody to give me a break, because I get kind of sleepy and kind of tired. I have this saying that I tell people. I have this sign, this picture in my den at home that says, "When I die, I want to die peacefully in my sleep, not like my grandfather did, not kicking and screaming like the rest of his passengers."
That's
so,
right.
So when I get a bit sleepy, my wife says, "Okay, I think it's time for me to drive." So anyway, she is a great driver. She drove a school bus before I met her, but she really appreciates what we do, and she's not afraid to drive our motorhome, towing a car or whatever. And so, it really helps the wife to be able to drive the car. And, in certain cases, it's the guy. I mean, I've seen situations where the wife does most of the driving and the guy doesn't want to drive or whatever. So it's not always the wife, but typically the guy's going to do more of the driving because he's driven truck or whatever. But if you can make it easier for your wife to drive, she's going to want to spell you a lot more too. But it's the thing, because a lot of us guys can drive anything. I mean, I've driven a lot of quote unquote crap over the years, and I couldn't figure out a way to keep it on the road, But that's not what I enjoy. I like to have things that I really enjoy driving, and I feel like I'm driving it, and it's not driving me. And that's what we want to make people do. Feel like you've got control over this thing, and you know what to do. And that's another thing. We like to give people all their options. We don't make them buy anything. We do the assessment, and you can pick and choose as little or as much as you want to do. But if you do choose to do something with this, you're going to have an idea what to zero in on, where you're going to get your biggest bang for the buck. And that's another important thing that I definitely feel it's important to get a proper assessment done first. You're, again, like you mentioned earlier, not just throwing parts at something.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I love that. That should be a slogan. I want to drive it. I don't want it driving me. That's perfect. That's perfectly said. So what we'll do is we're going to add all your contact information, your address and everything down in the show notes. So for anybody listening right now, go check out our show notes. We'll have links in there that will bring you right to Henderson Lineup website, and you can check them out a little bit further. Go check these guys out. They're going to make driving easier and more fun for you. So
come and see us at some of the rallies we're coming to too. We'll be at FMCA in Lincoln. We're going to be there at the Tiffin rally in Wyoming, Rock Springs, and probably be going to the Winnebago rally with our new Sprinter chassis as well. I don't have a booth there, but I'll probably just go visit and hang out with some other friends we have there. And we're doing the Escapee rally in Lebanon, Tennessee as well. So love to meet anybody in person and chat with them. And hopefully you guys will be there and I'll get to connect up with you guys again.
Excellent. Yeah, I will be at 2 of those shows that you just mentioned. So we will see you.
Very cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. Really appreciate your time.
It was great to have Robert on the show again to talk about that comfortable driving experience we are all searching for in our RVs. I have read his book, and it talks a lot about the process to achieving that ride through personal stories and experience. Click on the link in the show notes to explore this book on Amazon. It's a good read and only $2.99. If you contact Henderson's Lineup, tell them that Sean and Kenny from Beyond the Wheel podcast sent you. As always, thanks to Battleborn Batteries for their support of the show. It would not be possible without them. Also, if you are in need of an extended service contract, check out the link to wholesale warranties in the show notes to get a free quote and some education about the pros and cons of extended warranties. Take care, everyone, and safe travels.
This episode is brought to you by Battleborn Batteries, the best name in the RV and marine industry. These lithium batteries are designed and assembled in the USA, backed by a 10-year warranty. The best solution for your battery anxiety. So go check them out at battlebornbatteries.com.